Samsung's foldables have been setting the standard of what bendable phones can be, and while they might have some fierce competition now, the Galaxy Z lineup is still highly relevant and the most widely available. With the latest iteration of the Galaxy Z Flip, it's right here in my pocket, things might not be leaping forward a ton, but I have used it for a little over a week to see if my eyes would pop out of my head, like this camera package, trying to find out what really sets this one apart. Hey, it's Joshua Vergara. What's going on, everybody? This is the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 6 Week 1. Yep, this flip smartphone has been my main for the past week or so, directly following my day one with the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6, which directly followed the Unpacked event in New York City. As I mentioned in my Fold video, it's not that the flip was undesirable to me this year, it just didn't seem like it was bringing a ton that was really new to the table. And as such, I went for the slightly more refined, large foldable, and some mainly positive results in those early days. And now, with my first week finally in the bag with the smaller foldable, I find myself feeling pretty similarly about the Galaxy Z Flip 6. There's no way around it, the phone looks and feels almost a bit too much like its predecessor. I say almost because this really is not a perfect copy. There are a few things that have been changed and it happens to make a difference. When it comes to the feel, the sides are all flatter and the gloss has left the building, leaving a more satisfying and ultimately more secure touch to the handling. Contrary to the Galaxy Z Fold 6, this phone is the one that you'll easily handle with one hand, tucking a thumb between the two halves to open up the sandwich and reveal the full screen hiding underneath the cover display. And like the more previous models of this phone, I feel perfectly fine just digging my thumb in and basically scraping my nail across the screen without it causing any real damage. The screen protector on the main display has done its job before protecting that screen, and I'm sure that will continue. What I do notice when I dig that thumb in is a very subtle change in the contact points of the phone's two halves. If you look really closely, you'll see like a super thin black lip that almost goes all the way around the inner display of both of the Z devices this year. It's this lip that creates a seal when closing either device, instead of just the rounder frame of the previous models being where those contact points were. Now, while I think it is a pretty nice way of literally closing things up, I will admit that having to dig my nail between them is a tiny bit less comfortable than it was to do before. A tiny bit, but a noticeable bit. And when it comes to the looks, it's all about getting colorful. Now, I do like how the color is being used this time. For example, the yellow is not just a back panel on the black frame. This time it's yellow on yellow. So much so, in fact, that the yellow, or any other color you might purchase, is seen in the rings around the camera lenses. When it comes to the yellow one, it does look a little minion-y, but personally, I dig it. By the way, if you're interested in getting any of these phones for yourself, I have links to deals that are happening right now on all of the new Samsung products in the description and in the pinned comment below. If you use those links, you're really helping my channel out, so thank you so much. Especially if you're considering these phones, consider checking out those links below. The better feel and the colorways have made me do something that I haven't felt comfortable doing with a Z Flip or Z Fold in a while. I'm using this phone and the Z Fold totally naked without cases. And you know what? I've had no issues taking the phones in and out of pockets, opening and closing with one or two hands, and bringing them with me across borders like I did for a special outing during this week one. Well, the tea's ready. Today's tea is a kukicha. If you saw a couple months ago, I was in Japan and I did buy a bunch of tea from out there. Kukicha is actually made from the same leaf that ends up becoming stone ground into matcha, only it's using other parts of the leaf that include like the twigs and the stems of the leaves to create this that you can brew 3 to 5 minutes like most other teas. It has a lot of the same great flavor of a sencha, which again is the leaf that eventually becomes matcha if you stone ground it, and it's just a really good everyday tea. For today's tea break, I wanted to bring a little bit of a reminder to everyone to just remember to be present, but also to practice being so. Lately, I've been training my brain to focus better, which is why you don't see a whole lot of footage in this video of my actual plane rides using the device as a way to keep myself distracted as I go to destinations like Mexico City, which you're going to see soon. Instead of using the phone for distractions and videos and music and podcasts during those flights, I just read a book. I didn't even wear headphones for ANC or anything. I know it's a trend right now and it goes by a certain name, but I genuinely want to get better at unitasking, and there's no better example of unitasking than just getting lost in a novel. I truly think it's been working. When I'm actually doing work, I can now get things done a bit more effectively as long as I minimize all of the background distractions because I'm now used to just unitasking. When I'm with my friends, I'm way more present and spending time with the Unlocker, David Kogan, and Mr. Mobile, Michael Fisher during this week one, and that was a true highlight. So that's your reminder for today's tea break. Remember to try and be present. When it comes to work, maybe that means unitasking. When it comes to life, that means genuinely being in the moment. And as always, I'll end this tea break by asking, what's going on, everybody? Let me know how you are in the comments down below and tell me how you're being present these days. Thanks for taking this break with me because I hope you come for the tech, but you stay for the tea. All right, let's get back to it. That's right, I took the Galaxy Z Flip 6 with me to a short jump down south to Mexico City, where Spotify was actually having an event unveiling their Spanish language AI DJ. This was the perfect time to use the Galaxy Z Flip 6 in one of the main scenarios that someone like me puts it through, social media posting. And since it was a 2-day turnaround, I figured packing as light as possible was called for. That include making the Flip the only phone that I would bring with me, as it wouldn't take up much room in my pockets while jumping between planes. Now, as I mentioned before, I didn't use the phone as a distraction machine on these flights, something I haven't done in a long time. I didn't even wear headphones. If I was going to hear anything, it was going to be my inner monologue reading Haruki Murakami. So, airplane mode on 3 and 4 hour flights meant that the phone was raring to go once I hit CDMX, which was something I actually found myself appreciating a ton. That's because when it comes to going on trips, power banks on flights are usually imperative since I'm using the phone to, well, keep myself busy. But if I'm not using my phone on the plane, it obviously will have plenty of juice by the time I arrive, and that means way less battery anxiety in situations that would usually bring it out of me. So it's for that reason that the outer display wasn't really getting a ton of play as the alternative method of propping up a YouTube video and setting it down on the seat tray in front of me. But while in Mexico City, it was certainly the perfect place to showcase the Spotify panel that is one of the enhancements that Samsung introduced on the Flex window. The cover display is virtually the same in this Z Flip 6 as last year's, at least on the surface. Its size and basically its functionality are largely the same. Samsung is trying really hard to just use the software to make things feel refreshed. How that actually fares depends on how much you actually use the cover display. Unlocking the ability to run full apps on here still requires either an enabled labs feature or the Good Lock app. Those are extra steps that could deter people from looking at the closed Z Flip as a full-on mini-me situation. Unfortunately, shrinking down most apps, and even when using the various widgets and panels that are on here, also shrinks down the usability. That's really the crux of the cover display. Despite everything that Samsung tries to add to the experience, it's still best described as like a large smartwatch that's on the outside of the phone. Now mind you, I don't really think that's a super bad thing. I actually think there's a whole lot of room out there for a flip foldable like this that you can literally close and then put away. A little bit of mindfulness never hurt anybody, and being able to close our digital lives like this, I think there's room for that. Now that being said, the cover display is still one of the main ways to properly personalize a phone like this. Wallpapers can be interesting and even move if you choose like a video or a GIF or something, though mine are pretty simple renditions of Los Angeles and Tokyo scenes. Multiple widgets can be put together on single pages now, though you can't just put any old widget on the cover display. It's still from a curated list, much like running full apps before you install Good Lock. And there are other panels like being able to control the new Galaxy Buds 3 Pro, the various sound modes, and of course the Spotify Recents page. These provide other types of access to apps that you might use often. I find it useful enough, but that's about it. Once we're in the main display, however, things are familiar and yet properly performing. The usual yearly upgrade of the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 processor puts this in line with any high-end flagship phone for daily tasks, and I have to give some props to Samsung for adding a vapor chamber to the Z Flip 6 this year to keep things running as cool and thus as smooth as possible for as long as possible. It actually moves the Z Flip 6 closer to slab or bar phones that can do it all without breaking much of a sweat. From productivity to media viewing to longer gaming sessions, and of course Marvel Snap for me, but I am getting into Zenless Zone Zero as well. The phone still gets pretty warm under heavy load, don't get me wrong, and you usually feel it up here, closer or around the cover display, but at least it's trying. The same goes for the slight bump up in the battery life, which sees the Z Flip 6 pack a 4000 mAh unit inside of its foldable body. It can be charged up wirelessly as well and does wireless power share, but depending on what accessories you're using, like let's say this year's newest smartwatches, you may not be able to use it as much as you want to. I wish there was a much bigger bump up in the wired charging. We still get 25 watts on here, which works fine, I guess, but being able to charge back up in a hurry is something that we're used to in plenty of other phones. I think it's time for Samsung to put that in all of their phones. That being said, I did not find myself worrying too much about hitting single digits before I should. While in Mexico City, I did have one day where I just wanted to have a power bank on hand for safety. But that was probably because of the phone's struggle to connect to anything close to or higher than LTE speed networks throughout the day. Back here at home, where Google Fi is connecting to 5G without any problems, I was easily getting over 4 hours of screen on time with some small stints of Android Auto charging here and there. After all, this is LA. I drive a lot. Which brings me to the core experience of using a flip. It goes in the pocket, nice and easy, and then a nice little flip up reveals a classic and ultimately good bar phone. Once you're in the main display, the Samsung software is as robust and usable as ever. I even discovered that you can easily create stacks of widgets, so now I have 2 different calendars all just in the same place. Even down here, the Google search bar also moves over to my Trello widget. I don't know if this is a new thing, but when I discovered it, I was like, great, I can have 1 page of widgets and just use that 1 page for multiple types of things. On the topic of AI, I have to admit that I haven't really used many of the features that Samsung is really pushing. The most that I used was translation in the gallery. First, I would take a picture of a taco stand menu and then try to figure out what those certain items might be. Other things like interpreter, the note summarization, transcription, and generative features all still take a backseat when it comes to my daily usage, popping up solely when the situation finally calls for it. That's the part I find hard about the current AI talk. Everyone is trying to tell us why all these features are useful, and they are, but until they are either essential and or seamless in the core use of a smartphone that we know right now, at least for me, those features are just not used a ton. Now, what might be used a lot are the cameras, and Samsung did well to shorten more gaps between their foldable and classic bar phones by outfitting the Z Flip 6 with a proper 50 megapixel main sensor. Now beyond that, the Flip still doesn't get more than the secondary ultra-wide lens, but at least it works well enough and makes this phone a pretty practical choice for the budding content creator. After all, putting the phone down and taking pictures and videos with the flex window as the viewfinder means vertical short-form video creators have plenty of ways to set up a shot and actually film. It worked perfectly fine when documenting myself, let's say, eating some of the best tacos I've ever had in my life at 4K resolution with pretty good autofocus for showcasing items, or in this case, tacos. As a general camera, the Z Flip 6 gets the job done exactly the way that it should, though anyone that follows super high-performing camera phones will still find almost any foldable somewhat lacking in that department. Don't get me wrong, the new sensor is a welcome move in the right direction, but who knows when this form factor will finally allow for bigger and crazier optics. Oh, and of course, the inner display camera is capable enough for the more classic selfie shooting experience, but why would you do that when you have the flex window which grants you use of the rear cameras in those situations? After about 1 week with the Galaxy Z Flip 6 so far, almost 2 at this point, it's easy to feel a little bit mixed. Deciding on an upgrade based upon the looks is a little bit more of a personal choice, but I will admit that the feel of this phone is better than it has ever been. It's such a small adjustment made by Samsung, but it makes a difference. Maybe this is a little bit more true for the Z Fold 6 than the Flip, but still. Much of what is better in this year's Flip seems either intangible or somewhat specialized. It comes down to these questions. How often will you use those AI features? Will notes and summarization and generative AI be something you access on the daily? I mean, my AI use still comes down to more Google-centric tools like Circle to Search and Google Lens. What I can tell you is that whatever your style of daily use, the Flip is more than equipped to keep it as smooth and as snappy as ever. And so, there you have it, week 1 with the Galaxy Z Flip 6. So far, I think if you're on a previous Z Flip where the outer display is at all smaller than this, it's definitely time to upgrade. But if you're on last year's phone, maybe find a place to actually hold and feel this year's phone, demo it for yourself to see if the slight adjustments to the design actually make enough sense to do a trade-in. And for everyone else, foldables might still be a foreign concept. Unfortunately, Samsung is asking for even more this year when it comes to that barrier of entry. So I want to ask you, how do you feel about Samsung's latest Flip? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But from there, I'm going to go ahead and call it on this one. Thank you so much for hanging out with me again today. Please take care of yourselves and each other, and enjoy your tea, everybody.